with Andrew Chelney and Nick Zararis.
Rangers fans, welcome to the best Rangers podcast in town. I'm Andrew Chelney alongside Nick Zararis, and we are Liberty Blue. We scream about the Rangers so that you can save your voice. That's how deeply we care about you, and we appreciate that you've joined us for the ride. This is episode 35, live on Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube. Pre-recording just a little bit earlier on Monday, so hopefully Christopher doesn't get any silly ideas between now and when this goes live later in the day. We'll put the full video up on our YouTube, Liberty Blue Podcast, and the audio version will be available as a wherever you get your podcast as well, whether it be Apple Music, Spotify, or wherever it should be there. Give the show that illustrious 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It helps the show more than you think it does. At Liberty Blue Pod on Twitter and Instagram. I am at Chelney Andrew, CHELNEY Andrew, alongside Nick Zararis, Nick Zararis. Those are our personal Twitter handles to follow as well. Nick, well, the Rangers won 5 in a row, and they got some new toys in the lineup. How about that?
Hey, man, it's very nice when... So at least we know the GM and coach were not just completely oblivious. They were just kind of waiting for the right moment to address the very obvious needs. I mean, we've spent the better part of the entire season saying they need one more top six forward and they need a better sixth defenseman. They did both of those things. They did it at a reasonable cost. A late first-round pick, a third-round pick, a player who's not going to be on your team anymore in Sammy Blais, who was struggling to stay in the lineup, and a prospect in Hunter Skinner, who might be an NHL guy, but he's more likely an AHL guy. The Rangers did well here. They didn't give up a ton. They addressed 2 positions of need in one trade. You could still argue they maybe need to add one more forward to this group, and then you're really set. But I'm pretty content. I'm very happy it's not Patrick Kane. I'm very glad they didn't give up a ton for a Timo Meier type, where it would have been great to have him for one playoff run. But beyond that, you wouldn't have been able to afford him, or you would have had to get rid of good guys to keep him beyond this season. So this is about as good as it's going to get for the situation the Rangers were in.
I love this move for the Rangers. I think this is great because you give up a first round pick, and it's going to be whichever one is worse between theirs or Dallas's. So that's going to be a late first round pick as is. A conditional fourth, Hunter Skinner, who's 21 years old and couldn't even play in the AHL, had to be sent down to the ECHL. So I kind of don't know what his NHL perspective is going to be. But if you're 21 and you can't hang in the A, then it doesn't look like that's going to be a long NHL career. I mean, hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully Hunter Skinner goes on and has a great career. But as it stands right now, doesn't look like there's a great prognosis for him as an NHLer. So with that in mind, you give up things that you don't really need, and you get 2 pieces that you've desperately needed. Right, you get Nico Mikkola, who did not have a tremendous first game against the Kraken, but I was there, and let me tell you something: 2 of the 3 penalties that was called against him were complete nonsense. So I would take that with a grain of salt, but he is worlds better than Ben Harpur. Not saying a whole lot because Ben Harpur is not an NHLer, so actually playing an NHLer with Braden Schneider should help out tremendously. And Vladimir Tarasenko, who scored in his debut against Seattle. Panarin loves the guy. This is somebody that makes the Rangers so much more dangerous. On paper, on the ice, now you have another weapon to be worried about if you're playing this team. When before the Tarasenko trade, you would have, Gaudreau and VC and those guys on the top line, and you can kind of, okay, well, we have to worry about Panarin, have to worry about Zibanejad. We don't really have to worry about whoever's on the right side of those guys. Now you do. Because now there's so much more leeway for Gallant to be like, okay, well, we could put Kreider there, we could put Tarasenko there, there's so many different combinations now that Gallant could put out on the ice that makes this team dangerous. And that is one of the best things about this trade is you didn't really give up a whole lot for him, or at least anything that you really needed. Like Brendan Hoffman, still a Ranger. Like there's a lot of names that were rumored to be moved, or maybe for Timo Meier or for somebody else. They all stayed, and the Rangers got what they wanted, what they needed, and they didn't give up a whole lot to get them. A+.
Yeah, another part of this that's interesting now is For 2 deadlines in a row now, we have seen the Rangers prioritize a shoot-first volume guy. Last year was Vetrano, whose only role when he was on the ice was shoot the puck whenever you have it. And that's what Tarasenko's role is going to be here. Let it rip. He's not the player he was a couple of years ago. He's not going to be a 40-goal guy. He doesn't drive offense on his own. But as a pure volume shooter, there are a lot of guys you could have done worse in acquiring than Tarasenko, whose only job is going to be shooting, whether he's with Zibanejad, whether he's with Panarin, however they will end up shaking these lines out. Maybe they go out and get somebody else to be that other top 6 wing. That would require a little bit more money probably, but this deal makes the team better as a whole, because I said it last week, the day they traded for him. This makes the rest of your lineup better because you can play Gaudreau and Vesey further down in your lineup, which makes those lines better. The Rangers right now in the regular season, more often than not, they're going to have the better team than most of the teams they play against. And then when it comes to the playoffs, then you start worrying about the margins, and that's where having that depth of having a Vesey on your third line, a Gaudreau on your fourth line versus in your top 6 is going to make a world of difference. That's one of the things that I really like about this trade is it's deepening the lineup and making the whole team better. And it made the third pair better too, which the third pair hung on for dear life a lot of December and January while the Rangers have been on this nice heater. I think they're like 24-4 or something like that since early December. A lot of that was 950 save percentage with the third pair on the ice. Like, yeah, they don't give up a ton of quality chances, but they give up a ton of total chances. Now you can kind of settle that down a little bit, and you can really start to see what this team could be. The game against Seattle really reminded me of a game against Pittsburgh last year in the regular season on a Friday, where in the first 10 minutes of the game, it was over. The Rangers scored 2 goals in the first 9 minutes of the game, and they went downhill on them the entire game, kept chipping away, kept being aggressive. And yeah, Seattle got it back in that game towards the end with some garbage time offense. But you see what the Rangers can be with a better equipped lineup now. And you start to see the picture come a little more into focus of what they can be. And just for argument's sake, I mean, they're only 6 back of Carolina with 29 games to go. That's doable. Legitimately now with the group they have in place, they have to make up a 6-point gap in 29 games. That is doable.
No, it's a great point. And one of the things that I want to reiterate that you said is by acquiring Tarasenko, you not only make your top line better or your top 6 better. Now, instead of moving Gaudreau and Vesey to the top line and saying, hey, go produce offense, you can now slot them into the bottom 6 where they shine. That's where they're supposed to be. VC's having a tremendous season. Barclay Goodrow is supposed to be in your bottom 6. That's where he is great at his job. If you put him on the top line and he struggles, gee, I wonder why he's struggling, because he's not a top 6 player, but he's great in the bottom 6. Now, by acquiring Tarasenko, you are not forcing bottom 6 players to play above their means. And now when you do that, you have Tarasenko top 6, and now that line is dangerous. Now those 6 forwards are dangerous, but also your bottom 6 are dangerous because everybody is playing where they're supposed to be. And the one thing also that the Rangers have gotten lucky this year in is injuries. Zibanejad hasn't been out for 4 months. Kreider hasn't been out for... Listen, Kreider hasn't been out for 6 weeks. Like, to this point, knock on wood, like Rangers have gotten lucky to this point in terms of injuries. So when we are watching them play at full strength and watching how they've been playing these last 2 games against Carolina, they got hammered in that second period, but one of the things that made that game kind of stand out to me was the fact that they just kept chipping away. They didn't stand back and let Carolina just run them over, and that would which they could have done, and they've done earlier on in the season, where you would see that it's a back-to-back. Carolina's a good team. You can make the case that they were tired, this and that, and you just chalk that up as an L and you move on. They didn't do that. Late in that second period, Panarin tied the game up, and then that was it. The Rangers kind of took over from there, and that was the entire game. Halak played very well, and you have to give credit to Jaro Halak. Both of those goals weren't on him. Every other shot that he needed to stop, he stopped. He had a tremendous game for the Rangers, and I think he's won 7 games in a row for the Rangers.
Yeah.
He has been playing very well. The start of the season did not go well for him. We talked about that, but now he's really solidified himself as the backup for this team. And the Rangers really, they did not give up. And that is one of the prime highlights of that whole game. Yeah, Panarin had 4 goals and that was great and all these things, but the Rangers continued to play their game and they played it well. They didn't give up and then they won that game. And that's one of the key things to look out for moving forward, going into deep February and March and all these things, is how are the Rangers facing adversity and how are they fighting against it? They saw it, they had it against Carolina, and they fought it and they won, and that's good.
It's not just winning, it's how you win. Because the way we have kind of generally looked at this is this translatable? Is what you're doing every game, can you carry something over from that and keep building something on it consistently? Can you keep building these good habits over the course of a season? And you saw Panarin jokingly say after the game against Carolina, or I forget if it was against Carolina or Seattle, where they were like, yeah, they kind of got back in the game there at the end. Well, he's like, that's how we are. We're the Rangers.
It was against
it's never
Seattle,
easy.
yeah.
Yeah, it's never easy. Well, I mean, yes, but at the same time, like, could we not? Could we just put the game
That'd be
away?
great.
Can we just put the game away as opposed to making everybody pucker a little bit there towards the end? The game against Calgary, letting them get that extra goal towards the end, where you kind of had to, okay, this game isn't over. We're not just going to wait for Igor to shoot on the empty net kind of deal. Like, good week last week. You take care of Calgary, who's a borderline playoff team. You take care of Seattle, who's a playoff team. You take care of Carolina, who's a playoff team. You take care of Vancouver. Granted, they probably should have beat Vancouver a little cleaner, but
Yeah.
you win your games. At the end, you keep winning. There's not a lot to complain about. Sure, there are little things you'd like to clean up. That's the thing here. It's not just about winning. It's cleaning up the mistakes, building on good habits, and trying to find something to really get into a good groove here in the second half. And that's another part of the trade that I think we should mention here is they did this nice and early, so they've got plenty of time to figure out who they want to play Tarasenko with down the stretch. I do think that's an underrated aspect of getting this done a month ahead of the deadline is now they've got a good 3 weeks to know if we want to play Tarasenko with Zibanejad, with Trocheck, with Panarin, without Panarin, with Kreider, whatever. And then you can kind of say, hey, maybe we need one more forward in here come deadline day, and they'll have a little bit more cap space come deadline day because of the salary accrual of only carrying 22 players. But for all intents and purposes, that's about as good a week as you're going to have in the NHL.
I mean, when you win every game, it's tough to say otherwise. One of the things that also to keep in mind when you trade for a player like Tarasenko early, I understand the thought process of waiting till the deadline because you accrue more cap and all these things. But one of the things that can go wrong by waiting, that the player that you want sometimes gets injured. If Tarasenko continued to play in St. Louis and then in 2 weeks he gets hit along the boards or whatever in a play that would have happened in St. Louis or wouldn't have happened in New York, and then he gets injured. Well, now what do you do, right? When you trade for a player early, sometimes you unknowingly mitigate that kind of issue from happening. So the Rangers, as you mentioned, they did this early just to see, okay, we have Tarasenko, we have Mikola. What else do we need in order to make this run go all the way? Because right now, and we texted a little bit back and forth early in the week, and this is going to be difficult. I'm not saying this is going to be easy. I don't have any genius solutions to this. The Rangers do still have another first round pick to use this season. Do they trade it? What do they use it for? Because if the thought process is that this is our window right now and we have to go all in, or at least as all in as we feel like we can go, do we then move that first round pick? But you still have to make the cap work. You have to make all these things work. And that's really very, very complicated when you have all these RFAs and not a whole lot of cap space to work with unless you move some money out. So it all depends on how risky and how frisky Christopher Drury wants to be. Because if he really wants to roll the dice and he could get spicy and he could do all these things, or he can see this lineup and go, okay, well, we have this team. Maybe a depth forward, maybe Tyler Mott returns, because that's been rumored for months and months now. What if Tyler Mott comes back and is that the roster that we want? Is that the group that wins the cup? Maybe Drury goes, we need somebody better than that. And he goes and he trades that first round pick for somebody 50% retained, and he gets a third team involved, and he wants to get all these, he wants to be weird with it. And it's really right now all it comes down to is what Chris Drury sees in this team and how weird he wants to get at the deadline.
I think that first round pick is going to end up getting saved, and I think you're going to see if they make another trade, it's going to be trading Kravtsov for a mid-round pick, and then using that mid-round pick for whatever forward defenseman, whatever you're thinking, because they don't have any. They only have Colorado's second this year because they traded their second this year, last year, and they. I don't think there's a world in which they trade that other one unless something weird comes available that they weren't expecting. Because, like you said, they would have to get a third team involved to add anybody with substantial salary. Like, even if you were to add somebody who's making $5 million a year, they're only going to have about $1.5 million, $1.3 million of cap space left on deadline day based on the roster they're carrying right now. So they definitely would need a third team involved, which is, I don't know if anybody making that much money would be worth trading a first round pick for that you wouldn't be able to keep beyond this year. So I don't see that. But like we were saying during the week, I think Kravtsov is almost certainly getting traded.
Well, he asked for a trade earlier today. Reportedly, SNY put that out there that Kravtsov is asking for a trade.
Yeah,
and I can't blame him. I cannot blame him.
Yeah, no, well, don't worry. We'll do picking nits and we'll get our 30 seconds each to talk about this. But for the most part, a good week. One point I wanted to make on this before we talk a little bit more about the games from last week and then kind of move along here. They still haven't exactly found what their identity is. I think you saw glimmers of it this past week because they actually had quality forwards to play with each other. I think I got annoyed when Gallant juggled the lines 10 minutes into the Carolina game, even though they were playing relatively fine. I know they were losing at that point in the game, but to just juggle the lines for no real reason, it worked, granted, but for the love of God, man, let these guys play with each other and figure it out. They have one line combination with more than 150 minutes at 5-on-5 this year. We are in February. I do not understand why he cannot find a top nine that he likes. The fourth line, I understand they've had like 8 different guys for those 3 spots, so it's constantly rotating. That makes sense. But for the love of God, man, keep the lines consistent. None of these guys have a feel for playing with each other. I'm glad that they've settled on keeping the kid line together. That works. Now it's a matter of figuring out what you want to do with Kreider, Tarasenko, Panarin, Zibanejad, and Trocheck. That's really all the next month is going to be about, is figuring what configuration of those guys you like with each other. If you want to play VZ with them, if you want to play Gaudreau with one of them, whatever you want to do. I know I was reading in Staples' column this morning that they want to play Gaudreau on the wing, not at center. For whatever reason, they're going to play. They like playing Leschyshyn at center and having Gaudreau where they can play him anywhere. Whereas if Gaudreau's playing center, he can only be the fourth line center. That's part of why they like having Leschyshyn there, who we're going to make fun of at some point later in this episode. But that's the logic of why they waiver claim Leschyshyn is he is good on faceoffs. That way they can play Gaudreau anywhere in the lineup, depending on the game situation.
Okay, so then go get a better fourth line center. How about that?
I completely agree with you. I completely agree with you.
Why did the Rangers always insist on having one player on their team that is only there to get cardio? I don't know why.
The Brett Howden Memorial Scholarship.
That's right.
On.
That's right. They absolutely love nothing more than having at least one roster player on this team who gets consistent minutes, who does absolutely nothing. I don't know what their infatuation with this kind of player is. You got Brett Howden, you had Sammy Blais, and now you have Jake Leschyshyn, who do absolutely nothing, and yet they play every game. They use up a roster spot for reasons. End of sentence. Like I don't know what Jake Leschyshyn does. I don't know, because
what exactly would you say you do here?
I don't know what he's here for. Like if his whole thing is he's gonna get 70 minutes of ice time and maybe win a faceoff, okay, but like, there's more to hockey than winning faceoffs. Yes, like,
see, my ideal solution to this problem would be he becomes the 13th forward, they trade for another wing, and Gaudreau just is the fourth line center. I think everybody's in agreement that would be the optimal deployment. There are no viable defenses of having Leschyshyn in the lineup beyond the GM and the coach think he should be in the lineup. And that's the blanket appeal to authority, whatever you want to call it. That's the only reason Leschyshyn's in the lineup. They like him better. That's really it. There is no hockey reason. Leschyshyn is, I think, 23 years old and pretty much consensus the worst player in the NHL over the last 2 years. Like worse than any of the guys the Rangers have played, but he's here. And we're going to have to figure it out. I mean, they got him for the reason I just said. At least that's what Staples said in his column, that they want to be able to play Gaudreau anywhere in the lineup. Whereas if they don't have Leschyshyn, then they need a fourth line center, which limits what their roster flexibility is. But I digress.
Then go get one. Go get one that's better than Jake. Because listen, like if the only thing you're good at is winning faceoffs, then an upgrade is there to be had. Because there's a bunch of bottom six centers that can win faceoffs, but also contribute to the team. Because Jake, that's if that's his calling card is winning faceoffs, then okay, be the 13th forward and teach the other centers how to win a faceoff. Like that's what you're there for. If you can't do anything else, and it's really funny because we talked about Sammy Blais for a second. Like it's really funny how, of course, he 0 goals in 54 games as a Ranger. First game back in St. Louis, my guy jumps out of the box, gets a breakaway, and scores a goal. I mean, the script writers were so obvious. They were so obvious. I mean, come on, man. At least make us wait a game or two. It was funny because he hit a post earlier on in the game, and I got texts from Blues fans saying, "Oh, look, Sammy Blais just hit a post. Can you believe it?" I'm like, "Yeah, I definitely can believe that." And then later on in the game, he scored a goal. I'm like, well, the scriptwriters just...
Do you believe in miracles, Andrew?
Yeah,
do you believe in miracles?
I guess I do. Yeah, well, we didn't believe in him when he was here, but as soon as he got in St. Louis, he started believing them again because right after the trade, of course, it was the most obvious thing in existence. Sammy Blais was going to score in his return to St. Louis. You can't. I mean, the script writes itself, but it was a little bit too obvious there. I see what you're doing.
Okay, so we can use this as a natural segue into the new segment I want to introduce called Picking Nits, where every week we will each get 30 seconds to blanket complain about something. And the reason we are calling it Picking Nits is we understand that the Rangers are on a very nice run here since early December. We understand they've won 5 in a row. The Rangers' goal this year is to win the Stanley Cup. You win a Stanley Cup on the margins. You need to complain about the nits in February because in May, the nits aren't going to be nits. They are going to be concrete problems with your team. You think about what happened in that series against Tampa Bay, where once the offense dried up from the kid line, nobody else could score. The fourth line caved in every single time it was on the ice. Right now, everything is great. 3 months from now, you're playing a Boston, you're playing a Tampa, probably not. You're playing a Toronto, probably not. You're playing one of those teams you're definitely not playing Toronto because you're not playing Toronto in the first round. So the Rangers don't have to worry about the Leafs. Until the Leafs win a series, I'm not worried about the Leafs.
That's right. You're especially the last couple of years, like I've been thinking like this is the year. This is the year Toronto finally wins a playoff series, especially like last season. Yeah. Last season I was like, this has to be it. Pulled. Yeah, this is such a good team. The Lightning aren't very scary. Like that was my thought process. And then the Lightning came back in 7 and then beat the Rangers and then lost in the final. So
okay. My 30 seconds starts now. Very simple. I need one person on the internet who has numbers in their handle to tell me what Jake Leschyshyn is better than Vitaly Kravtsov at. That's all I need. I am going to clip this. I am going to put this on Twitter and say in the replies, tell me what Jake Leschyshyn is better than Vitaly Kravtsov at.
Go ahead.
And you don't get to say, well, Jimmy Vesey is in for Kravtsov. No, he's not. No. The best version of this lineup with the forwards they have is Kravtsov on that line with Kreider and Trocheck, and then playing Vesey on the fourth line with Gaudreau. That is the best version of this lineup that they have. They could have a significantly deeper lineup, but they are actively choosing not to for whatever reason. Okay, I yield my last 15 seconds. Andrew, go ahead.
I was at the game against the Kraken, and let me tell you something. Kravtsov did a really good job in the top 6. He didn't score, but like he did everything else that the Rangers want him to do. And now Gallant is like, nah, I'd rather Jake Leschyshyn in the lineup than Vitaly Kravtsov for reasons that I don't really understand what they are, but here they are. And Why? I don't understand it. This doesn't make any sense to me. And now SNY is reporting that Kravtsov wants out. I cannot blame this guy at all. He did everything that the Rangers wanted him to do. He's played so well, and yet they're not doing it, and he wants out. I can't blame him.
Nicely done, right against the wire. Very nicely done, Andrew.
There you go.
That's a man who works in
We're
radio.
professionals, Nick.
That's a man who
know
works
we
in radio and is always looking at the clock.
Listen, when you handle high stress situations like I do at work and like have you've done for years and years as well, we know how to wrap right before the end of a segment here. So we got it.
All right. So this upcoming week, the Western Canada trip has never been kind to the Rangers. I don't think ever in my life. There was that one year, I think it was 2019, where they made 34-year-old Henrik Lundqvist have 50 saves in consecutive games against like the Oilers and the Canucks, or the Oilers and the Flames. And they won both of those games, but got dramatically outplayed. But Hank said, okay, I'll do this one more time for you guys just for the road. I am a little worried about the trips to Calgary and the trip to Edmonton. Vancouver, they should handle Vancouver. Then again, Vancouver also dummied the Islanders, which was a very weird game on Thursday night.
Yeah.
That was a weird one. But this
Sorokin did not look good in that game either.
No, he didn't.
If he played the way that he normally does, the Islanders win that game. It was more so that Sorokin didn't have a great game that the Canucks won that, as opposed to the Canucks just being the better team. If Sorokin just has a normal night, the Islanders win that one. So I wouldn't put too much stock in this one. But they're a dangerous team. If you give them space, they will pounce on it.
Yeah, Vancouver's one of those teams that's playing with absolutely nothing to lose, so they're just going to let it rip. And whatever you want to say about Tocchet and whatever, he's trying to set up what the team is going to look like next year with good results this year. But they've got what? They've got Vancouver, Edmonton, Calgary, Winnipeg. Realistically, you want to take 6 out of those 8. You're better than Edmonton. You're better than Calgary. You're better than Vancouver. Winnipeg, you're more talented than, but you could argue Winnipeg can goalie you just the way you could goalie them. That'll be a difficult game because Winnipeg's been very good defensively. Hellebuck is having a very nice bounce back season. Last year, he wasn't great. The year before, he was great. Hellebuck's one of those every other year goalies. So now we're kind of at the point now where it's time to be a little bit greedy and start worrying a little bit about playoff spots here, because the next team back in the standings is Washington, who's 8 points back of you. And Washington has played 2 more games than you. You have 2 games.
They've also haven't looked good. They've been 5-5 in their past 10. It's a very strange team because they go out to Boston. They play the Bruins, a team that does not lose at home, period, let alone in regulation. And the Washington Capitals go to Boston and beat them in regulation. And then they go home, play David Quinn's San Jose Sharks, and get dumpstered by the Sharks. Very strange team. I don't understand. I don't really know how to read them, but they've been having injury issues all season. So they've been kind of just holding water. They've been kind of just treading water and just surviving for now, hoping that everybody comes back and they go on this run. But so far, they've kind of been a streaky team.
Yeah, because the bigger point here is it's time to start worrying about where you are going to be in the playoffs, and if you're properly situated. In the first part of the show, we talked about, do they still need anything else? This month will go a long way in determining if they go out and add one more guy. But you really, if you're going to play the Devils in the first round, you really want home ice, because that will help, even though Gallant doesn't do the hard matching that you probably should in the playoffs of looking for favorable matchups, using last change to your advantage, whatever. You want home ice against the Devils. You would like to not play the Devils at all. In all honesty, I would rather play Carolina than the Devils, because the Rangers historically have always played Carolina pretty well. I mean, that goes back to Alain Vigneault. That goes back to Tortorella. The Rangers always have historically played the Hurricanes pretty well because of the style the Hurricanes play. They're a volume team, and the Rangers are pretty well adapted to play against a volume team, because the Rangers' best guys can say, okay, we're better than you. And that's typically what ends up happening when they play Carolina.
The thing about these few playoff spots that we have left here is you take a look at the wild card. We talked about Washington. Pittsburgh just got embarrassed in LA. They got shut out. It was 6-0. Dustin Brown. I don't know why this was a very weird thing the NHL did. They brought out the Stanley Cup and let Dustin Brown lift it one more time. That was a weird thing the NHL did. Listen, you're not Mario. You're not Wayne. I get it. I get it. You won 2 cups, and the LA loves you and all that. Put the cup away. That was a weird decision by the NHL to make. But in any case, the Penguins got dumpstered by the LA Kings. It was 6-0. It was never particularly close. The Islanders lost 2 games in a row that they really should have won both in. Lane Lambert, very much unhappy with the team. He was very vocal about it during the game, after the game, and I've read reports in practice that he's been very, very vocal in practice this morning as well. So the Islanders are kind of losing it right now. Bo Horvat's playing well, but the team isn't. And then
They
you
need
got
more than that.
Yeah, they definitely do. Florida's right behind them. A team that could either destroy you, or Bobrovsky wouldn't be able to stop a beach ball and you win 9-4. And then you got Buffalo, a team that is Tage, end of sentence. So realistically, right now, the Rangers are solidifying their playoff positioning, especially when they keep winning. I mean, when you win 5 in a row and you won seven in your past 10, and you continuing to accrue as many points as you possibly can, that's what good teams do. And that is how the Rangers are more and more likely to make the playoffs easier and easier with each passing day. But now it's not good enough, because now not only should your goal be to make the playoffs, it is, okay, let's get home ice. And as you mentioned, the Devils are a team that can beat you at any point in time, and it's a really scary matchup. The one thing I will say about the Devils, though, for some reason, is that they can't really win at home. They will destroy anybody away from New Jersey. But if they're playing in New Jersey, they kind of play very meh. So maybe if you want to play New Jersey, I don't know. We're splitting hairs, and 2, playoffs are very much different than the regular season. So all these stats that are meaningful now mean absolutely nothing come April. But the Rangers are solidifying their spot in the playoffs, in the dance, with each passing day. Now it's just a matter of, okay, we have to keep winning so that we can position ourselves to potentially get home ice advantage, and also play somebody in the first round that we know we can beat, so that we don't have to sweat and panic in a 7-game slog of a series just to move on and play somebody else in the round 2. The Rangers did that a lot of times during the Lundqvist era, where they would get to the first round and then just play a 7-game slog. And they get to the second round and they play a 7-game slog. And then by the time they get to the conference finals, they are exhausted. They need to be able to close that series better and faster. And the more you win, the higher chance you're likely to do that.
Yeah, no, that's the thing here. This is entirely being greedy. This is entirely splitting hairs. This is entirely nitpicking. But ideally, if you could play Washington or Pittsburgh or the Islanders or the Panthers or the Sabres in the first round, you would much rather do that than playing the Devils. Just simply put, you much rather would do that. It's a more favorable matchup. Okay, we'll do 3 stars. We'll talk about the games this week, and then we'll get out of here. The 3 stars this week, I went a little bit off the board with one of mine, but Andrew's got the 3 conventional ones you would expect. So I'll let you go first, Andrew.
Filip Chytil, I mean, he's been great. He's had a couple of timely goals. He's looked really good on the ice. Eye test, analytics, you name it. Filip Chytil has been a very good player for the Rangers this week. Panarin, 4 goals. Kind of tough for me to not put him in there. I mean, Panarin was essentially the reason the Rangers won that game. And when you score 4 of the 6 goals and you look as good as you do, you get a star. And also, he looked good with Tarasenko, who's my other star of the week. Tarasenko scored 3 minutes into his debut against Seattle. I had front row seats to that game. That was a very fun experience to be a part of. And seeing that go live and seeing how the Garden reacted to Tarasenko. And he seems to love it here. The fans seem to love it here. And so far, the Panarin-Tarasenko duo have worked out well. So those are my 3 stars.
Yeah, I've got Chytil for the same exact reason. He's just letting it rip. He's not hesitating. He's not deferring. The puck's on his stick in a shooting position. He's going to let it rip. Sammy Blais, greatest contribution to the Rangers, was getting traded last week. We hardly knew you. We greatly appreciate you for your service. Yeah. We thank you for Tarasenko and Mikkola. Best of luck in St. Louis. Very, very glad. One less thing to complain about.
Sure.
And lastly, I'm going with Zibanejad. Had a 5-goal week last week. Consistently, man, Zibanejad's potting 2 or 3 goals pretty much every single week of the entire season. You do that for 6 months, you're going to end up with 40, 45 goals. That's pretty good. I mean, there was a point in time where the Rangers couldn't get 60 points out of their leading goal scorer. Like the year they went to the conference finals and they won the President's Trophy, their leading point getter was 67. That was Zuccarello. The year they went to the Cup final against LA, I think it was 63, and it was Richards and Zuccarello tied. So we've come a long way from the Rangers trying to piecemeal their offense together through a depth means. Whereas now you've got legitimately 4 or 5 guys who can all flirt with 70 to 80 points.
It's a lot of fun to watch. It's definitely when you have more pieces of your offense for other teams to worry about, that inherently makes you a much more dangerous team, because teams cannot cheat to one player and kind of sag off everybody else because those other players aren't as good, so they're not big threats to score or produce anything offensively. When you have, especially on the power play now with Tarasenko, and now you can move things around, when you have a lot of different pieces on the ice at the same time that are equally as dangerous to score, other teams have to panic, because now they have to be on top of every single player on the ice at all times, and that's a lot more draining than only needing to worry about one or two or maybe even three players on the ice at a given time. When you have 5 players that are all capable of scoring goals and providing that crisp pass or that move that creates space for themselves, that's a dangerous lineup to play against. And when you have a team right now like the Rangers that are primed, hopefully, I would think so, for at least a decent run in the playoffs, this is a scary team to play against when you have so many offensive pieces and even pieces on the blue line with Adam Fox and Keandre Miller and occasionally Trouba when he decides to do things that are positive offensively. This is a scary team to face off against. In the scouting report, you go, okay, we have this player and that player and this player and also that player, but also this player and this one and this one and this one to all worry about. That's scary. When you have to defend all of these names at the same time, teams are worried about that.
All right, last thing I want to get in before we get out of here. Very glad they got Lafreniere going. It took him a while. Granted, you can argue the merits of some of the arguments that the team had about what they were doing with him, but it's good they've got him going. They need 3 lines that are able to contribute offensively if they are going to go as far as they would like to go this year. And finding a way to get him, Kakko, and Hedl all going at the same time, imperative to any success they're going to have this year. You cannot go deep in the playoffs with offense from less than 3 lines. It's that simple. You need at least 2 to get to that second round. You need 3 at least to get to that conference final. And it's really important that now that they've got that going, do not break it up just to try and get other lines going. Like you're trying to get all 3 things going at one time. You're trying to spin 3 plates at once. Just because you got one going now, don't take that plate off to start the other one spinning again. It's really important now that they keep the lines consistent and they find a way to make it work. They know what works to some degree. Now it's a matter of maximizing what you have.
The thing about the Tarasenko trade as well, really quickly, is that by having him in the top 6, you no longer have to break up the kid line to get those players up in the top 6 to try to force some kind of offense. When you have the third line be the kid line, that for all intents and purposes, last few weeks have looked incredible. They've looked really solid on both ends of the ice. They're creating chances for themselves. They're not giving up a whole lot. This is a really solid line. When you have that line as your third line, that's really scary, because now your top 6 is solid. You can keep the kid line as is. You don't have to mix people around to force offense. You have that be your third line, and now you have people on the fourth line like Gaudreau and VC and those guys that are dangerous against other teams' fourth lines. This is hopefully, Gaudreau and VC stay on the fourth line because that's where they're best currently positioned to be. Having that as your fourth line, and hopefully they bring in a better center than Jake Lecision, and that could really round out the fourth line. That is one of the best fourth lines going on any team right now. They are dangerous on offense. They can actually do things, and they're not a liability defensively. That is a really solid fourth line to have on your team. So by having Tarasenko and by moving these things around, you don't have to force pieces where they don't need to be, and the whole puzzle piece in and of itself is starting to form, and you don't have to super glue pieces that don't belong in and jam it into one of the holes to try to make it work. You can just make it all seamless, and that is one of the beautiful things about this trade.
Yeah, I'm very happy, man. I was a little worried going into the deadline they would do the easy thing, trade for Kane, and as you could tell by his comments, he thought he was getting traded to the Rangers. So I'm very glad they didn't take the easy decision. They made one that worked out a little bit better because they got a defenseman in the trade too. Everything is set up well for them here. It's a matter of staying healthy, staying consistent, and just don't overcomplicate things. The talent's here. This is one of, if not the most talented Rangers teams of my life, of my conscious existence. So let's keep it going here. That'll do it for this week's show. We will see you guys next week. Make sure you are following along on whatever podcast platform you like to use. Leave the show a 5-star review if you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you're on YouTube, make sure you're subscribing. Join us in the comments. Been throwing polls up on YouTube every now and then too. Make sure you're following the show's socials on Twitter and Instagram at Liberty Blue Pod. Andrew and I's personals, Chelney Andrew, Chelney Andrew, and then mine, Nick Zararis, Nick Zararis. Make sure you're following those. Rangers aren't in action until Wednesday. The West Coast swing, truly for the sickos. Only the lunatics are staying up when they have work the next morning for games that start
That's
at 10:30.
right. So we'll be live
Eastern.
tweeting them because we're psychos.
Yes, correct. All right, we'll see you guys.